We are going to go in program order, and we're going to begin the discussion with Fall River Legend. I'll just give a little bit of background. Fall River Legend is a thoroughly American work. It was created in 1948 by American choreographer Agnes de Mille, American composer Morton Gould, and American designer Oliver Smith. The ballet is based, of course, on the infamous story of Lizzie Borden, who murdered her father and stepmother with an axe or a hatchet, not sure, in 1880. Is it 82 or 84? I think it's 82. I wrote it down wrong, but I think it's 82 in Fall River, Mass. It is one of the few ballets, in fact, based on historical events, although, as you will hear, its creators took a good amount of poetic license in the service of a more compelling story. So, Diana, I want to start with you. Can you please talk about Agnes de Mille and her unique place in dance history, and also your connection with her?
Sure. I'll start just quickly with my connection with her. I began assisting Agnes de Mille with a ballet that she did called The Informer for American Ballet Theater. And it was a period where she was starting to go back over her older works and not being happy or satisfied with them, wanting to do them over and change them. And so that's when I came in with a few other dancers. So she choreographed The Informer and then did a ballet called The Other also at American Ballet Theater. And then we continued to work together on other works that she had done even in the 40s that she was going to change and redo. So I worked with her for the last 6 years of her life. And in terms of Fall River, and in terms of the way she worked, she was constantly, even if she did not change the choreography for a ballet like Fall River, she would nevertheless tinker with it always, and change certain things in terms of for the dancers and that nature.
We've got some, actually, if you could go back to the previous slide, we have some wonderful photos of Agnes de Mille, who was, of course, also a dancer. There she is in Rodeo, and then as a younger choreographer, and then as a real American eminence, which she certainly became. So I just want to follow up, Diana, if you could talk a little bit about how Fall River Legend came about. I know it followed Rodeo, but if you would sort of take us through that would be wonderful.
Sure. She had mentioned that she was always fascinated by the story of Fall River. She also had wanted to do a ballet. I mean, she had done Rodeo, which was a ballet, about a cowgirl, very determined cowgirl, but is more comical. But she reflected back on a time period in her life which was very difficult for her when she was younger. Her parents had divorced, her father being William de Mille and her uncle Cecil B. de Mille. She was always sort of fascinated by this, by the story of Lizzie Borden. She started to work on the ballet, and then later on actually wrote a book regarding the ballet, because she always believed that although the real Lizzie Borden had been acquitted, well, not acquitted, they did not charge her. They did not feel, the society did not feel that she committed this crime, heinous crime. But Agnes always believed that she did. And so she wrote this book actually later on in the 60s, Lizzie Borden, The Dance of Death, Fall River Legend, and went to Fall River in the 60s with a lawyer, and they read over all of the documents from the jury. They visited the house, which had changed a bit inside, and then she also started interviewing people that lived in Fall River that were still alive. They were maybe children or teenagers at the time. And she and the lawyer were fully convinced that Lizzie Borden was guilty. And they felt that she was acquitted mostly because the jury was made up all of men. And so they felt that the men did not want to imagine that their daughters and their wives were actually capable of such a horrible crime. So the book is really fascinating, and there's pictures of the actual father hacked and and the stepmother.
Yes, it's grisly. I was surprised when I turned the page and saw those photos. This is the only copy that I know of in Philadelphia, so I have it right now, but when it goes back to the free library, please read it. She's an astonishingly good writer.
Yes.
Just one more thing before we move on to Paul. So, of course, she was acquitted, or however we want to technically say it, but in the libretto of Fall River Legend, she is hanged. First of all, we don't see the murders,
Right.
so that's important for our audience to know, because Agnes de Mille thought that was something you just didn't do, was show that kind of stuff on stage. And she and the composer Morton Gould, who worked very closely together, as I understand, to develop the story, decided that she should be hanged at the end rather than set free. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, there's the famous story where, she worked very closely with Gould, and same as she did with Copland and any of the composers of her ballets. They talked about whether to hang her, and eventually Morton Gould said, "Agnes, I don't think I can write acquittal music." So she answered back, "Well, then we'll hang her." Which, again, she believed that she was guilty anyhow. So that's how
So
that...
poetic justice, not
Yes.
just poetic license.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, Paul, will you tell us, I've alluded to your connection to Agnes de Mille, but will you talk to us a little bit about your personal connection to her, and also about the de Mille style and what makes it distinctive?
Well,
Can you hold the microphone?
actually, the ballet rodeo was what made me become a dancer. I've been all my high school years in ROTC and going to an army camp in the summer, and I was planning to go to West Point and become a professional soldier. And one of the officers under my command, I was the battalion commander, said, "Hey, Sutherland, my girlfriend's sick. I have a ticket to the ballet. You want to?" This was Fort Worth, Texas, and back then it was called ballet theater. They didn't have it, and I said, "Sure, why not?" So the first ballet I ever saw was actually rodeo, and that was a Saturday night. I remember the Sunday morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke my folks up and said, "I'm not going to be a professional soldier. I'm going to be a ballet dancer." My dad's going to go back to sleep.
So just for context, how old were you at the time that you
18.
made this? 18.
Yeah.
So starting ballet at 18, all of you were much younger than that, of course, when you started.
Well, I have to say, the standards were very different. I mean, not that there weren't good dancers in those days. There were, but it is a different, 3 years later I was in ballet theater. And the rodeo was the first ballet I was put into, but the second ballet I was put into was Fall River, with Nora Kay and Johnny and
So that was Nora the original
the original
Lizzie.
cast.
Yeah.
Let's say initially I was in the Corps de Ballet Rodeo in Fall River. But what I realized, right away with her, everything that she did is motivated. There's a reason. You can't just dance in her ballets. It's not like Balanchine, which is abstract. You just dance, do the steps. But she wanted everything had to have a reason, and I found it fascinating because she was one of the few choreographers that did do that. She and Anthony Tudor, and she was very very perceptive.
So I think it makes sense then that she would have worked so much on Broadway, right, and in theater, because
Oh, I think
she
so.
thought she had that perspective. Am I
Sure,
right? Yeah.
Sure. You know, after Rodeo, she, you know, that.
I did read, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the opening at night audiences for Fall River Legend the response was mixed, right? And that some people were sort of disturbed by the psychological nature of it, but that at the same time it showed that ballet could tell a psychological story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'd just like to add, and we've talked about this a little bit in rehearsals, that what is so fascinating to me about the structure, how she structured this ballet, is that she basically created a flashback. I mean, and you think, how do you create a flashback in dance on stage? And she does that through the gesture and the placement of dancers, the use of depth, and
Yeah, it's
So-
remarkable. I mean, Lizzie even dances with a younger version of herself, which segues very neatly to Sydney. So I confirmed with Sydney before that this is indeed the first time she's portrayed a character from history, as a dancer anyway. So I'm very curious to know, like, how does that preparation, or is that preparation different from, say, all the fictional characters that you've, Odile and the Sylph and Odette. Sorry, I should have said Odette first. And how is that different for you?
Oh, it's majorly different, just given how kind of iconic this story is of Lizzie Borden, and how, a lot of people know that there's kind of just that idea where she killed her parents with an axe. And I think we dive deeper into, when we're doing this ballet and when I'm playing her character, into more of who she was as a person and what drove her to do what she did, and how terrible her life was to kind of drive her into this kind of idea that she was going to do this and commit this crime. And I think that's just, it's a completely different mental game than doing Odette, Odile. I think something like that, which is fictional, there's a lot of different interpretations you can take on. You can be, any kind of swan you want to be. Obviously, there's kind of one picture perfect, but there's a lot of ways that different dancers can portray those roles, but this is a little bit more kind of streamlined in the way that you want to really convey to the audience. You want them to relate to you and understand you in a way, even though you did these terrible things. You want everyone to understand how terrible everything was going on around you, and this is why she did it.
So as stagers, do you find yourselves talking a lot about acting and reacting and sort of using the nomenclature of drama directors or teachers? And what's that? And so this is for all three of you. Like, what's it like to get that sort of training while you're also getting it into your body?
In my opinion, this experience has been like no other, and I think it's a huge pillar in my kind of journey as a dancer, because a lot of dramatic ballets, quote unquote, that we think about, like Swan Lake, where it's just like heart-wrenching and the story is just it's just so intense. But doing something like this, which is very realistic and very, I would say, pedestrian, kind of trying to make everyone understand, as I'm a human being and I'm living this life, that people can relate to. Maybe it's not your parents that are making your life miserable, but there's a way for people to kind of relate to the story. And I think that this kind of acting is very, it reminds me of, I think about when I'm rehearsing this, about watching actors on TV or in movies. It's very much like that. Like, it has to be super organic and real. It's not like I'm a swan. It's very human. Yeah.
I should mention that one of the really nice things about, first of all, I'm thrilled personally because we've never done this piece before, and I'm always hungry for new repertoire. So, what, for example, would be something that, in addition to that, and what our audience might like to know is that there is a lot of video footage of Agnes de Mille herself talking about her work. And there is even a wonderful audio of her speaking with Morton Gould, the composer, and you can learn so much from that. But for example, what would be a note? Say you're working with Sydney on, a very dramatic scene. What would be typically something that Agnes de Mille would want you to say to a dancer in a kind of a wrenching moment?
Well, for one thing, she really wanted a dancer to be truthful. And so sometimes I say to really a lot of these dancers, all of you, they are incredible dancers, technically but for her work, so it's not the technical elements of the ballet. For her work, she really wanted you to be truthful. And so that requires a work that sometimes I say really most of the work in this ballet is to go home and personalize these moments for yourself, and not so much in the studio.
I would think that's very different. Yes.
Yes.
Probably none of us have committed murder, hopefully.
Yes.
But I think what a dancer has to do in these kind of ballets is have to, in their life, find those things in their life that to them was frustrating or horrible or terrifying or wonderful. And as I say, it can be if you're afraid of spiders, that can be a horrible experience. But a dancer has to approach this like an actor would.
Yeah. I would like to just say a few words about the wonderful Morton Gould who composed this. And one of the reasons I want to focus on him is not just that I'm a big fan of his music, but that his work is so integral to the creation of this ballet. Clearly, they worked hand in hand on this. And if you listen to that I think it was a radio show maybe that they did together, is that right?
Yes.
And they talk about their collaboration. There he is in various phases, even with Agnes de Mille, and I think that's Alicia Alonso, who evidently had to go on first because Nora
Kay was ill that night.
So there's Morton Gould. He was born and raised in New York City. He studied piano and composition at a little school that would later be called Juilliard. He was a complete musician in a way that few people are, but if you're looking at the photo on the left at the bottom, you're going to see him standing next to William Schumann, who was also a composer, standing next to Aaron Copland, who was a composer and conductor, standing next to Leonard Bernstein, who was everything, right? So this is a generation of musicians who were committed to feeling comfortable in more than one style of music, who composed as well as conducted, and who were, I think all of them involved in theater, maybe William Schumann not as much, although I think he did write a piece for Agnes de Mille. But these are all men of the theater. And Gould was no exception. He was comfortable in popular music. He had his own big band. If you look at the top right, he was a very accomplished pianist. He had his own big band. He wrote concert music. He conducted and arranged, composed for radio, film, television, musical theater. He really did everything. And he was, I happened to have met him. My first season here at what was then called Pennsylvania Ballet, we went on tour to the Kennedy Center in 1993 in the spring, and we performed a piece that he wrote for us for a new ballet by David Parsons. It was called Mood Swings, and I got to walk with him from the State Plaza Hotel, which you all are familiar with, from there to the Kennedy Center, and had a really delightful conversation. And you can see he was, incredibly accomplished. He was a Kennedy Center honoree, and he won the Pulitzer Prize, but he was a very humble and sort of thorough, down-to-earth musician. So I can quite understand And in the process of creating this, unlike other composers, he was willing to cut music if de Mille asked him to do it, or add music, or change music. In other words, really work as a theater artist, which is unusual. So those are my 2 cents about Morton Gould, our beloved Morton Gould. I'm going to move on to Valley of Death. Our other offering on the Evening of Horror is a world premiere. It has been created by our resident choreographer, Juliano Nunes. And in contrast to Fall River Legend, which is a historical, slightly poetical historical ballet, it does not come from the pages of history. It comes out of Juliano's imagination. But because Juliano couldn't be here this evening, he and I recorded a brief conversation a few weeks ago. So if you could please show the clip, that would be great. Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Affron. I'm the music director and conductor at Philadelphia Ballet, and I'm delighted to be sitting here with my colleague, Juliano Nunes, who's our resident choreographer. We are getting ready to produce his brand new ballet, Valley of Death. Juliano, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Till now, Juliano has been working with recorded music, so this is a huge treat.
Yeah.
So, speaking of music, I would love to ask you, and this truly is our first time chatting about it, which is so nice, about these 2 wonderful works that you chose for this ballet. There's the Ralph Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. Vaughan Williams was a 20th century composer, and Thomas Tallis was a 16th century composer, and Rachmaninoff's Isle of the Dead. And it turns out these 2 pieces were composed within a year of each other.
So magical.
Which is magical. Yeah. So can you start by telling us what drew you to these 2 works?
Yes. First of all, a lot of research. I was digging deep to try to find something that would express what I was feeling inside, because I had the story written down beforehand. And I went on research for weeks, and I got so frustrated. And then suddenly, when you sort of give up, then you get a proposal of some music and you're like, huh. And you know it already in the first 2 seconds. When you listen to it, you're like, this is it. Just please keep going on the way that it feels connected to me.
I think it's possible that this might be the first time these 2 pieces of music have been put together.
I think so.
For a dance.
Yeah.
And I must say, just working on it from the musical point of view, I'm very struck that they actually do fit.
Yeah.
They both refer to ancient sounds,
Exactly.
right? So 16th century church music, modal music, not quite so despairing, the first piece, but still very kind of somber.
Yes.
And then the Isle of the Dead, and Rachmaninoff referred very often, and as he does here, to the Dies Irae, which is, again, one of the most ancient melodies we know. And somehow you found that.
It found me, actually.
It found you in the process. Well, we're so excited to present this to Philadelphia. This is a world premiere, and this music for us is also a company premiere. So thank you, Juliano. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure is all mine.
I just wanted to give a quick overview of the plot, since it is a story ballet, and it's a story that our audience, of course, doesn't yet know. So Oscar and Beth, that's Zecheng and Jackie, are a prosperous couple who host a ball and who do not realize at first that their guests are not entirely well-meaning. So, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, because you know this piece better than I do. An uninvited guest, Agatha, that's Thays, she arrives and the mood darkens instantly. And by the end of the first half, there are 2 pieces of music, and the ballet is accordingly in 2 parts. At the end of the first part, Agatha leads the guests, encourages them to torture and kill poor Oscar. Oscar's dead at the end of the first half. In the second half, Oscar finds himself in the Valley of Death, which turns out is Agatha's domain. The guests are now revealed here to be her demon minions, and she tries to drag him even further down into the depths. And to do so, she has this clever idea of bringing a vision of Beth to sort of torment Oscar even further. This plan backfires, and Oscar and Beth's love tears a hole in this dark valley of death, and the ballet ends with a vision of hope. Now, did I get that right? Perfect. I got it right. Phew. Okay. So Zecheng, as a dancer and as a choreographer too, because you wear both hats, can you please talk about the process of having a new work choreographed on you? And we really do want to hear both perspectives, if you can bring them both.
Well, first of all, I want to mention about how much that Juliano give the dancers the freedom to discovering what the own fear into our own lives. Exactly what he was mentioned about. So that was kind of like, I was like, that's clever, really. So that's what I was trying to do in the rehearsals. I think each rehearsal I'm trying to dive a little bit deeper and trying to imagining what he sees me to do in the way that I can discover more. So it's always this kind of like a back and forth with him. He's like, more, okay, more, okay, there's nothing there, more, sure. So it's always like that.
So is that physical? Is it your facial expression? How do you give more?
The more means like more true to yourself and more like from your heart. What in real life, like exactly what Paul was saying is in your life experience, what is most fear to you and how you can expand that more, not just in your facial expressions or physical motions. How can you transfer that fear to cross the pit into the audience?
And you're doing this with classical ballet steps, right?
Yes.
Right. So that's. I mean, of course. Please, again, correct me if I'm wrong. Agnes de Mille is using classical ballet language, right? But you use the word pedestrian, right? So there's a little bit more earthiness to that movement. So your movement in Valley of Death, is that still very like premier danseur type language?
Completely no. Yeah, completely not. He adds a lot of he give a lot of freedom. It's like in that moment we're doing like a jump, like a tour in the air, and the way usually classical technique we land perfectly, nothing movement. But this time he's like, I want you to just drop on the floor. How you drop depends on how your emotion takes you, how the momentum takes you, and how you getting up, like which part of your body have the last breath that takes you getting up. So that the freedom that he gives to us is at that moment, which part of your body still have that last strength. I think that was something that is smart.
That sounds very, very interesting. Thays, the character of Agatha, as I alluded, is a demon from the underworld. So in both cases, I have to say we're playing against type. I happen to know these women, and they are not like these characters, but they're wonderful actors. This is very unlike the sort of ethereal roles. She's not a sylph. She's not weightless. She's not a willy. She's not even a swan. She's a character from the depths, as I understand. So what are the technical challenges of playing such a terrible, dastardly character?
Yeah, Agatha, I see her as a creature. And because I'm dancing on point, there are a lot of technical steps. Like there's fortes, there is arabesques, there's jumps, there's everything in it that you can expect from a ballet. But I have to make everything more grounded and creature looking. So it doesn't have a picture. It still has to have a movement. So that's what's challenging about Agatha, because it has to be more grounded and heavier and bigger, and all I want to be is light and up on balancing, but that's all that Agatha is not. And she has to transfer that, not just with my facial expression, but also with how powerful and my muscles look, and how deep and my plie goes, which is something Juliano has been really taking me out of my comfort zone. He always does that, which I really.
So when you're doing the more technical steps, are you being asked to do those steps and at the same time be more grounded, or is it more that you're alternating between, whatever it takes to do fouettes and then,
Yeah, good question. So I think what he asks is to base myself on my technique and take it further. So, for example, there is a period where I do a double step up and then an attitude turn, which is similar to Swan Lake, like the Black Swan period in the variation. But he took it further, and he wants my plie deeper. And he says, try to think about your weight is on your left ear. And it's a different turn because he doesn't want it to be a perfect turn. He wants it to keep moving, and he doesn't want it to just stop. It has to finish and keep moving to the other step. So I'm basing myself on the perfect technique, but he wants it to take it further, but that's the challenge because my habit is to be square, be the nice two periods, but he wants to take me out of the mold, and that's what the process has been like, which can be very challenging. And
right? I mean, it sounds like all three of you so far are in a way, if I'm just sort of oversimplifying, being challenged to be less perfect, less pristine, less. I mean, you take class every morning, and I presume that the class is still based on those ideals. And then 11 o'clock comes around, and you have to personify, these creatures.
the opposite.
Or monsters. Yeah. Jackie. Jackie has been put in a situation that happens quite frequently in ballet, which is to be asked to jump into a role that she wasn't necessarily expecting to perform. Has this happened to every person on the stage? This has probably happened to every person on the stage more than once, right? I don't think the audience is necessarily aware that this is such a frequent occurrence, and there are tons of reasons, and the reasons don't matter. But it's something that's also, in a way, part of your training, right? When people are always standing at the back of the room learning other people's parts. So I'm interested to know, Jackie, what it's been like in this particular situation to sort of not only learn a role quickly, but learn a brand new role quickly.
It's been very exciting. This was actually my very first Juliano ballet ever. I know he's a resident choreographer, but this is my first time working with him. And I started out in the corps and was loving it. And then he came back, and I was put into this principal role with Z. And so it's been a challenge because the role wasn't necessarily created on me, and I'm trying to interpret Beth in the way that he wants, in the way the other dancers are interpreting her. And I do a lot of pas de deux work in the role, and so a lot of it has been relying on Z. And, we don't have a lot of time, but building a chemistry and connection with one another so that we can do these pas de deux. And Z is very intentional, and after rehearsal, we talk about, where we're going to have this moment and where we're going to breathe here. And so that's been the catch-up that I'm playing because I wasn't a part of the original process, but it's been fun.
I would imagine that you're a very fast learner. I think you all have to be fast learners. I'm no doubt that you're a fast. If you don't know, Jackie, in addition to being a fantastic dancer, is also going to law school, and I think it's important for our audience to know that dancers do lots of different things in addition to dancing. So I'm also very proud of Jackie. So there it is. So Jennifer, it's a new production for everybody. Jennifer and her wardrobe department have been in the process of building this new design from scratch, and it's no small task. If you would please tell us something about the process that you've been going through and some of the product as well.
Sure, I would love to. So the beginning of something is always so much fun because anything is possible. but then you feel like you're trying to make sometimes the impossible possible. I love working on Fall River Legend is amazing because you stand on this foundation of people who have done it before you. When you're creating a new work, it kind of feels like rollerblading on wet rocks. You know, you're like, I've got my protective gear on and I'm just going to come and take anything that comes at me. But what's been so amazing about this particular process of essentially being like an artistic surrogate. So when you aren't the designer, it isn't your creation, it isn't your concept, and you're bringing this to life, you really need to be able to work well with the designer.
And we should mention his name.
Who is Josef Hotate. And he was absolutely wonderful through this whole process. I am so excited to work with him again for Romeo and Juliet. But so during the process, he wasn't in the country. So it was a lot of sending pictures to him of every single time that we did a sample of something. So the costume I brought today is the female guest, and it has a 30-piece corset. So every piece of this corset, when you lay it out, first of all, every piece is individually patterned and then individually size graded.
You mean individual to the dancer who's going to wear it?
There are 3 sizes that we started with, but then, yes, every single corset will be individually sized to the dancer. So the pieces look like little metatarsals. They look like little bones. It's very Halloween, but yeah, it's so couture. And then the skirt that was built is incredible because it has all of this structure and all of this pleating, but the inside of it is built like a classical tutu, so that way it is perfect for our dancers and it will feel like a garment that they've worn before. So the audience is seeing something that looks completely not like anything on our rep, but it should feel like something that the dancers have danced in. So that way they put it on and they can do exactly what it is they do best.
So before Thays shows us this wonderful garment, just tell us a little bit about the process of communicating with a designer who's nowhere nearby. How does that work?
Every time I do it, it's completely different. You know, whether they're close to me or not. With Josef, what it is that we ended up doing was I would create a sample of something, or someone in my shop would create a sample of the project they were working on, and then we would take meticulous pictures. So we would do the sample in, let's say, a white lycra with black seams, so that Josef could really see the lines. He has this amazing attention to detail and he loves lines. So I knew that's what he wanted to see. So I would send him a photo. He would send back to me with a red line just barely drawn, a 1/4 of an inch lower than the actual seam. And we would work until we got to what it is that he wanted to do.
Amazing. So Thays, if you don't mind holding this up for us. So what character gets to wear this astonishing garment?
So 10 characters, 10 dancers get to wear this. Sure. Yeah, you want to stand? I can stand with you. Ta-da! So we have the female guest look. So this is the look that the female guests will be wearing in the first section. In the second section, they take this entire piece off and then they put on a very, very long cape along with the male dancers. But as you can see, there is so much corsetry work happening inside of this garment. And I don't know if you can tell, but the inside is this very light, it's almost like a heavy net, but it's creating all of the structure that's keeping the skirt. I mean, the skirt can almost stand up by itself, honestly.
So it doesn't look very flexible from where I'm sitting. How do dancers dance in corsets?
Well, they don't like it very much. We absolutely do our best. So the corsets, they have boning, and some of the panels don't have boning, and it's just the piping for show. But yes, I mean, we're just really, really careful with where the bones are placed. When I patterned this corset, I'm very used to dancers coming to me backstage and handing me a bone that's like popped out the side of their marzipan tutu because they're, got an arabesque that's, above their head. So when I put the pattern in, I really try to make it so I know where the bones are going to go, which if you don't know what bones are, I know we're talking about Evening of Horror, but so, right, it could be anything. So the boning are either steel or more of a plastic material that go inside of these panels, and they're what give garments their structure. And there's a lot of steel boning in ballet costumes. I mean, there's a ton that are in everything you've seen, Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and in this.
It's so beautiful. Congratulations.
It's amazing. My shop is so talented. They are a bunch of geniuses. I put this on in the summer and just tried to wiggle around. And I'm like, this is amazing. I think this is going to do the trick.
And they're still working, which is very exciting. Before we take questions from our audience, I thought I would just say a few words about the composers whose work we hear in Valley of Death. So the first, I alluded to it a little bit in my conversation with Juliano. The first part is by Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was a British composer. He was actually a great nephew of Charles Darwin. And I wanted just to say a few words about where this particular piece comes from. So there he is, Ralph Vaughan Williams, and also a caricature of him. He did something very, very remarkable. He traveled the English countryside gathering up folk songs and tunes, and he was like an anthropologist of music. It made his teachers very upset because they were still much composing in the German tradition of Brahms and Beethoven, and they were very annoyed with him. But he took a profound interest in the music of his own country, to the point that he decided, and he took it upon himself, to write a whole new English hymn book, because he did not like the one that had been passed down from generations. And he assembled, again, music that was actually British and not borrowed from other countries. And so one of these hymns is by Thomas Tallis, who is the gentleman on the left, who's a 16th century, also British composer, who wrote this little third mode melody. The third mode just means that it's starting on the third degree of the scale, and it gives it a kind of an ancient sound. This is why. And it's a piece that's written, this Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis, it's a piece that's written for string orchestra only. And it has a very hushed and sort of magical quality for that reason. The other piece is by Sergei Rachmaninoff, who is basically a contemporary of Vaughan Williams. If we can move on to the Rachmaninoff slides. He was inspired to write this music by a painting called Isle of the Dead. And maybe I forgot to send that slide, and if I did, I apologize. So Isle of the Dead is a painting by a Swiss. Oh, there we go. I didn't forget. Down on the bottom right is a painting called Isle of the Dead, and it was done by a Swiss painter named Arnold Böcklin. And it was a painting that was reproduced many times. In fact, Adolf Hitler even owned a copy of this painting. It was a fascinating painting for many people, including Sigmund Freud. And Rachmaninoff saw this black and white reproduction. It had been done as a color painting originally, but he originally saw this black and white reproduction, and he later said that if he had seen the color version first, he would never have written the piece. But he was so taken with this portrayal of these three figures in a boat. So there's an oarsman, there's also a corpse in the boat, and there's a figure shrouded in white, and they're making their way towards this island mausoleum, which was a 19th century kind of obsession kind of a thing. I think now when I think about island mausoleums, I think about Venice, and I think how Igor Stravinsky is buried on an island in Venice. And Rachmaninoff was actually in a bit of a rut at that time, and he talked a lot about how important it was for him to have either an image or a story or something to inspire him. And so you can actually hear the rowing of the oars. Da, 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 da. You hear that. I'm sorry, am I going the wrong? No, I'm going the right way. And then at the end, you hear the oars again, and it's rowing away from the island. So while this ballet is not based on this painting, it creates a mood that lends itself quite stunningly, I think, to this new work by Juliano. So this brings me to either taking a question from our audience, or I have a question for the people here. So maybe while you're preparing your questions from the audience, I just have one question for you all, which is, it should be mentioned that we're preparing 2 programs at the same time. We haven't said anything about the first program. It is Carmen and Bolero. That comes first. Evening of Horror comes second. So you all have been engaged in preparing 2 programs at the same time, so, which is something we don't often do, kind of this close back to back. Can anybody talk a little bit about what that particular challenge or joy is?
Well, I have to say we come off of a summer from Red Rose till October, so preparing 4 ballets simultaneously is, I think, a huge challenge for all the dancers going off of summer. And some dancers dance all summer, and even if we take the time off, there's no way to really get yourselves ready to do 4 ballets at once. So even though maybe individually we don't all do 4 ballets at once, but most of us are doing at least 3 out at a time. So that's probably, I think, a big challenge.
How about you all?
I definitely is a challenge because like before we were talking about it, it's like from rehearsal to rehearsals. Like sometimes you're doing this ballet and suddenly you change to another character to the other ballet. So
Is it that the technique is so different from ballet to ballet? Is that what makes it more
technique is definitely
challenging?
one of it, and then definitely the emotionally is other way. I feel a little bit bipolar. This rehearsal, this mood, this motion, this mood, it's a little bit like who I am today. That can be a little bit like distracting.
Anybody else want to chime in on this, or how about from the perspective of the
Sure.
wardrobe department?
So
That's a lot of
in
costumes.
wardrobe, it is a lot of costumes, and I think in wardrobe, we experience maybe sort of the same theme as the dancers do. We try to avoid switching gears because it is difficult to switch gears. So what happens when you are a small crew in a wardrobe shop is you end up being the sole responsibility for Carmen or the sole responsibility for Fall River. So that is definitely something that we're feeling for this with 4 different ballets going on, is that Elmo is doing Valley of Death. I have a very talented crew, but it becomes one person is now responsible for moving the needle forward for each ballet so that they stay focused, but it is a big responsibility for each person.
So we're going to keep you talking because our first question is for you, Jennifer, which is, how long does it take to create each costume? So Jennifer has already described the process a little bit, but how long, for instance, would it take Elmo and the gang to create this?
That's a really good question. So there's one aspect of making any garment, making all of the clothes that we're wearing here on stage that I think is a big secret and no one really realizes, is the pattern making part of the process, and the sampling part of the process takes so incredibly long. So when I was talking about the process and I said I made a sample in white with black seams, like that part where I'm sitting, you can do pattern making a couple of different ways. You can do it by draping fabric over a form. You can also do it by with rulers on a table. I do it with rulers but on a computer. So I do CAD pattern making, and I can sit for hours and hours and hours just doing that before anyone sees the garment. And then garments can be calculated how long they take. I do a lot of budgeting for projecting by the seams. So a 30-piece corset, when there are 10 dancers, that's quite the math equation. I'm not the mathematician in the room.
So your department's been working all summer long, yes?
We
While
have.
the
We
dancers were on layoff, you've been working all summer long.
Oh, 100%. And we brought in more in the summer just to get us started because the pattern making is such a huge part of the process. But we started the minute we knew what designs looked like. Myself and my wardrobe assistant, Mark Mariani, we started designing or working with the designer in patterning immediately.
Somebody wants to know if anyone has choreographed, I believe, the Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. I would be surprised, I don't know, but I would be surprised if somebody hadn't because it's such a well-known work. And one of the reasons that I think I can speak for the orchestra and I are so thrilled to play this is that these are two standard orchestral works. And for us, that's just a huge treat to get to perform that because we don't often get to perform standard orchestral repertoire. Here's a general question. Oh, what are your favorite moments to dance in each show? Fall River Legend and Valley of Death. I would love to start with Sydney because she is our Lizzie Borden, or one of our Lizzie Bordens. So do you have a favorite moment?
That's a really hard question. I think it's a journey. The whole, as Diana said, it's one thing that's fascinating about this ballet is it's a flashback, and it kind of brings the audience up to speed on what led up to the final moments before, in this version, Lizzie gets hanged. But I think there's a few of my favorite moments. One, last week, we learned how to use the axe. So at one moment, we chopped a stump of wood with a real axe, and my hand-eye coordination, not good. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but it's not that bad. It's a little heavy, and it's a little bit of a prayer before. But so I think that's a really fun moment. I don't think many people can say they used a real deadly weapon on stage. And yeah, I think the dramatic part of the ballet, which happens throughout the whole thing, is just, it's incredible.
I want to direct that question to Jackie as well because she's playing they're all interesting characters, but Jackie's character has to watch her husband being beaten and murdered, and then she comes back in the afterlife to dance with him and give him hope. So do you have a favorite moment?
I think my favorite moment is our second pas de deux that Zee and I do together, just because it really is challenging me as a dancer. I don't really see myself as like a kind of slow romantic pas de deux kind of person. I typically do more energetic jumping type roles, and so it's a challenge to enter a role like that, and I'm really enjoying the process of doing that and becoming more emotional and slower. Zee is always telling me to move slower and to stop doing things with so much energy, and so he says calm down, take a deep breath before I do anything. So I'm just enjoying doing something that's very different for me.
That's great. Another question. Oh boy, how do you manage the emotional part of the work when you leave the studio? So I think I'm going to direct this to our married couple sitting on the stage because I am always curious actually about something related to this. She's getting two microphones because they work together all day long, maybe not in every rehearsal at the same time, but they also live together. And how do you manage all of the intensity of the workplace with, home life in your case?
Well, we learned. In the beginning, we did took work to home, and it would get heated. But we've learned how to communicate at work and how to work together. And most of the time, we try not to take work home. We try to relax. But when we do, it's actually very productive because if we're working on a role together, we actually take that extra time we have together to, watch videos of ourselves and improve here and there. So, here you can do more of that. There might be some arguing there. And then we compromise and.
So Swan Lake in the kitchen.
Yeah. Correct, yeah. Pretty much. But it's funny now in Agatha, as I torture my husband on stage, it's actually the opposite. I take my frustrations from home on stage. So I can, yeah.
Excellent. There's a question for Diana and Paul. Oh, what does repetiteur mean? It's true that we often we're so sort of deep inside the ballet bubble that I sometimes forget to translate the French terminology. So what is repetiteur? And can you tell us more about your role with the de Mille group, both of you? Hold up your microphone.
Yes, so repetiteur is the person that teaches the ballet, especially if the choreographer is no longer here. So they have all the counts, they have the music, they have to know the production elements of a ballet, and so they actually stage the ballet, teach the dancers, and also are involved in all the technical elements.
Do you have notes written down mostly, or is it mostly handed down through film and video? In your case, what are you using as a reference to teach?
Well, I'm actually still learning Fall River, sitting next to Paul, and Paul has incredible notes.
12 years ago, the only video I had was a 1970 rehearsal performance at Ballet Theater. And I probably have 100 or more pages of notes that are so detailed now that I don't know what's going on. It's so complicated. And now, of course, we have videos. I have a really good video of the Paris Opera. So you know, it's I don't think there is as much emphasis on written notes as there used to.
Right, video changed all that, I think, for most of us, yeah?
I would just say that what's so wonderful is Agnes wrote so much. So, I mean, there are elements in the book, actually, that can apply to the character and the experience of the ballet. There's also, for instance, with Rodeo, Paul actually tape recorded Agnes in several different rehearsals with several different companies, and so and then had them transcribed, and so we have her actual corrections of dancers.
So please read the many books by Agnes de Mille and go on YouTube and listen to her and watch her speak, because there's a wonderful record out there. I'm so sorry to have to bring this fantastic conversation to a close. Someone did ask a last question of me. Can I talk about aligning the music with the emotion? Ask me that after opening night, because I'm still working on it. But thank you. It's a great question. I want to thank these wonderful panelists for sharing their insights and expertise. Huge thanks again to Judy and Alan Freedman. Thank you so much. And if you haven't purchased your tickets for Evening of Horror or for our season opener, Carmen and Bolero, both choreographed by our artistic director, Angel Correa, run immediately to our website and buy tickets, because they will both be really wonderful shows. Thank you all very much.